In a world where resilience is often tested, some stories remind us of the strength of the human spirit. They show us that even in the harshest circumstances, love and determination can create something extraordinary. This is one of those stories. It's about a young single father, a man whose love for his child gave him the strength to endure unimaginable hardships. A man who, despite the crushing weight of his circumstances, refused to give up. He was just a regular man, like many others. He didn't plan for life to turn out this way. But as life often does, it took a turn he wasn't prepared for. With no family to lean on, no savings to fall back on, and nowhere else to go, he found himself living in his car. What should have been a temporary setback slowly became his new reality. By day, he searched tirelessly for work and resources, keeping his hopes alive despite constant rejection. He filled out countless job applications, knocked on doors, and waited in lines for assistance. But every night, when the world grew quiet, his car became his refuge. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was his entire world. A place to sleep, a place to dream, a place to make his child laugh even when his own heart was heavy. Imagine waking up each morning with the ache of sleeping upright, your neck stiff from resting against a cold car window. This was his routine. His mornings started not with the comfort of a warm bed, but with the sound of passing cars and the chill of the early hours. He'd carefully fold the blankets, ensuring his child stayed warm, and prepare a makeshift breakfast from whatever food they had left. A few crackers, maybe a piece of fruit, whatever he could manage. His car, parked in a quiet corner of a parking lot or tucked away on a side street, was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of his effort to shield his child from the harsh reality of their situation. He made sure his little one never felt the weight of their struggles, always putting on a brave face. His child was too young to understand, but they didn't need to. What they saw was a father who loved them unconditionally, who played games and told stories, who sang lullabies to turn their nights in a car into something magical. But this father's strength wasn't infinite. He often felt the world closing in around him. The questions haunted him every night. How much longer could he do this? Would his child ever have a real home? What kind of future could he provide from the front seat of a car? These doubts crept in, threatening to overwhelm him. But each time they did, he looked at his child, asleep and peaceful, and found the will to keep going. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he did it willingly because his child was his everything. In the face of hardship, he didn't break. He didn't give up. Instead, he poured every ounce of his being into finding a way forward. And little did he know, the turning point he so desperately hoped for was just around the corner. This is the story of a man whose love for his child kept him going when everything else seemed to fall apart, and the unexpected twist that changed their lives forever. Every morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the fogged-up windows of the car, the father would stir from a restless sleep. His body ached from another night in the cramped driver's seat. The stiff steering wheel pressed against his knees, and the cool morning air crept through the thin glass, making him shiver. He would glance over his shoulder and see his child still peacefully sleeping in the back seat, wrapped in a worn blanket. For a brief moment, that sight would bring him peace. It reminded him why he endured all of this. Carefully, he would shift in his seat, mindful not to wake the child. Slowly, he would gather their things. The blanket that served as their bedding, a small backpack with their few belongings, and whatever food they had left. The car's interior was their entire world. A home, a storage space, and a refuge from the harsh realities outside. He kept it as tidy as he could, knowing that even small comforts mattered. Breakfast was always simple, sometimes crackers, sometimes a piece of fruit if he had managed to find some the day before. On rare occasions, there might be a small carton of milk for his child. He would prepare everything as quietly as possible, turning the front seat into a makeshift table. His child would wake to his gentle voice, offering a kind word and a smile despite his own exhaustion. Once they were ready to face the day, the father would drive to a nearby park or a quiet spot where his child could stretch their legs. While his child played, he would go through his mental checklist. Which job application could he follow up on? Where could he find assistance for food or supplies? Was there a safer place to park for the night? Every moment of his day was consumed by these questions, his mind constantly turning over ways to improve their situation. But the world outside the car often felt overwhelming. Finding work without a permanent address was almost impossible. Employers would look at him with suspicion or dismiss him outright when he couldn't provide a stable phone number or home address. Some places he visited for help seemed to turn him away with cold indifference, as if his struggles weren't worth their time. He tried to shield his child from the worst of it, making a game out of their days. If they had to wait in long lines at shelters or food banks, he would invent stories to keep them entertained. If they were in the car for hours, he'd sing songs or ask his child about their dreams. But he couldn't escape the stares of strangers, judgmental glances from people who saw only a man and his child living in a car, not the love and effort that defined their bond. Inside, the father carried a deep weight. At night, after his child had fallen asleep, he would sit in the silence, staring at the dashboard, lost in thought. How did I get here? He would wonder. What could I have done differently? How can I make this better? These thoughts came in waves, sometimes consuming him, but he never let them linger for too long. He couldn't afford to dwell on the past. His focus had to be on the future. The father's love for his child was his anchor, the one thing that kept him grounded when everything else felt uncertain. No matter how tired, hungry, or defeated he felt, he never allowed those feelings to take over. His child deserved better, and he was determined to find a way to give them that. Every day was a battle, but it was a battle he chose to fight. He reminded himself of the little victories, the moments when his child laughed, the times they found just enough food, or the rare kindness of a stranger who offered help without judgment. These small moments became his fuel, tiny sparks of hope that kept him moving forward. For the father, the world may have seemed vast and unforgiving, but his love for his child was limitless. It gave him purpose, even in the face of relentless hardship. And though he couldn't yet see it, the turning point he had been desperately waiting for was closer than he could imagine. Far from the quiet, unassuming corner of the city where the father and his child spent their days, a different world existed. In this world, stories like theirs didn't go unnoticed. It was here that someone, a person of means and compassion, came across the father's story. Perhaps it was through the whispers of a kind soul, a community group, or a chance encounter. However it happened, the story of a young father living in his car, doing everything he could to keep his child safe and happy, struck a deep chord. This person was no ordinary philanthropist. They didn't seek applause or headlines. They didn't post their good deeds for the world to see. Instead, they believed in the quiet power of kindness. Their mission was simple but profound: to transform lives with humility and grace, to be the helping hand that others never saw coming. As the story of the father and his child weighed on their heart, they began to imagine what they could do. They weren't just moved by the challenges the father faced. They were inspired by his unwavering love and determination. This wasn't about charity or pity. It was about recognizing resilience and ensuring that such strength didn't go unrewarded. And so, the philanthropist began to prepare. This wasn't a task they approached lightly. They knew that genuine help required more than a one-time gesture. It needed to be thoughtful, impactful, and tailored to the father's specific needs. Their first step was gathering resources. They reached out to local organizations, businesses, and individuals who could contribute. A community shelter agreed to offer temporary housing. A grocery store owner pledged food supplies. A local car dealership offered to help with vehicle repairs or even a replacement. Piece by piece, the philanthropist assembled a network of support, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. But the philanthropist wasn't just thinking about immediate needs. They wanted to create a foundation for long-term stability. This meant more than just providing food and shelter. It meant finding ways to address the root causes of the father's struggles. They reached out to job placement agencies, childcare providers, and financial advisors, assembling a plan that could help the father regain his footing and build a sustainable future for himself and his child. The process wasn't without its challenges. Coordinating with so many people and organizations required patience and perseverance. Some were skeptical, questioning whether their efforts could truly make a difference. Others hesitated, worried about the logistics of helping someone with such unique circumstances. But the philanthropist pressed on, driven by a conviction that no obstacle was insurmountable when kindness and determination were at the center. Every step of the way, they thought of the father and his child. They pictured the father's tired but hopeful eyes, his child's innocent laughter despite the hardships, and the bond that held them together through every storm. The philanthropist knew that this wasn't just about providing help. It was about honoring their resilience, giving them the support they needed to continue their journey with dignity and hope. Finally, after weeks of planning, everything was in place. The stage was set for a moment that would change everything. The philanthropist didn't want the father to feel overwhelmed or pitied. They wanted this to feel like a genuine connection, a hand extended in solidarity and respect. As they prepared to meet the father, they carried with them not just material resources but also a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just another act of kindness. It was a mission to restore hope, to remind someone in their darkest hour that they weren't alone. The philanthropist was ready to step into the father's life, not as a savior, but as a quiet force of support, there to help him and his child find their way back to stability and possibility. It was a day like any other, one of those ordinary mornings where the sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting soft beams through the windows of the car. The father, as he always did, was carefully organizing his small, meager belongings, preparing himself for the day ahead. His child, still asleep in the back seat, clutched a worn stuffed animal, lost in a peaceful dream despite the chaos around them. The world outside felt as vast and unyielding as it always did. Yet he found comfort in this simple routine, the small moments of normalcy in a life that was anything but. But then, the sound of a knock on the window broke through the stillness. The father looked up, momentarily startled. A visitor was rare in these parts, especially this early. The knock wasn't the hurried rap of an officer or a stranger looking to judge, but a steady, intentional tap that seemed somehow out of place. His heart skipped, uncertainty flooding his chest. Was this someone coming to confront him? Was it a curious passerby? Or maybe, just maybe, another person who might offer something, anything, to make life a little more bearable? He hesitated, unsure of what to expect, and with a deep breath, he reached over and rolled down the window. The cool morning air rushed in, mixing with the lingering warmth of the car's interior. For a moment, all he could see was a shadowed figure, but as the sunlight hit just right, the face of the stranger became clear. A soft smile graced the stranger's lips, and the warmth in their eyes immediately stood out. The voice that followed was kind, yet firm, with an unmistakable confidence that carried a sense of reassurance. "Hi, I heard about your story, and I want to help." The father blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. He quickly glanced around, searching for any sign that this might be some sort of prank or misunderstanding. A good-natured passerby, perhaps, with a story of their own that had made its way to him. But the stranger's eyes, filled with genuine concern, left no room for doubt. "I'm sorry, I don't quite understand," he stammered, the words coming out more nervously than he intended. "What do you mean?" The stranger nodded calmly, as if expecting the confusion. "I know things haven't been easy for you, and I've been following your story. I'm here because I want to make a difference. You don't have to do this alone anymore." The father's mind raced. This had to be a mistake, a miscommunication. No one had ever come to help him like this before. He had been scraping by for so long, fighting every day to stay afloat, and now, someone he didn't even know, was telling him that they wanted to help? It felt too good to be true. Was it possible? For a brief moment, doubt took hold. He wondered if this was some sort of cruel joke, a gimmick, a fleeting offer that would vanish as quickly as it had appeared. But something in the stranger's eyes, the sincerity, the authenticity, stopped him. This wasn't a charity case. This wasn't a fleeting attempt at kindness from someone looking for recognition. This was something real. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. I don't know what to say. This is just too much. How can you help someone like me?" The stranger stepped back slightly and smiled, reassuring gesture that invited trust. "I've already made some arrangements. I've secured safe housing for you and your child, somewhere you can both feel at peace. You don't have to worry about where you'll sleep tonight." The father's heart started racing. Housing. Safe housing. It was a simple idea, but one that had eluded him for so long. His thoughts turned to the nights spent huddled in the car, moving from one place to the next, always looking over his shoulder. He had always wondered, with a growing sense of dread, when the next knock on the window would come, this time, from someone who wanted to send him on his way. He never imagined that one day, someone would knock and offer a solution instead. But that's not all, the stranger continued, their voice steady and filled with hope. I've reached out to several organizations to connect you with job opportunities. You'll have the chance to start fresh, gain stable work, and build something for you and your child. The weight of their words slowly sank in. Job opportunities. A chance to regain his dignity. The father could hardly process what he was hearing. For so long, it had felt like every door was locked, every opportunity out of reach. The simple thought that someone had found a way to open those doors felt surreal. And there's more, the stranger added, their eyes softening. I haven't forgotten about your child. I've made arrangements for childcare and educational support, so you don't have to worry about balancing work and looking after your little one. They'll be well cared for, while you focus on building a future for both of you. At that moment, something inside the father broke. The weight of the past months, the relentless fear and exhaustion, came crashing down in a flood of emotion. The tears that had been threatening to spill for so long finally welled up in his eyes, his vision blurring with the overwhelming relief that washed over him. His hands shook as he looked at the stranger, a voice thick with emotion struggling to find its way out. I don't know how to thank you. This is too much. I never thought I'd have this chance. I didn't even know it was possible. How did you even find out? The philanthropist gave a gentle shrug, as if this wasn't about the details of how it all came together. I just wanted to help. I'm glad I could. The father's chest heaved with emotion, as his mind tried to make sense of the kindness that had been extended to him. He had spent so many sleepless nights wondering what his future would hold, and now, in this moment, he could finally see the light breaking through the darkness. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a fleeting gesture. It was a real chance. A new beginning. I can't believe this. I don't know what to say, he whispered, his voice breaking with gratitude. The stranger simply smiled, their voice calm and steady. You don't need to say anything. Just take the help, and know that you're not alone anymore. And with that, the father knew that everything had just changed. The life he had been struggling to survive through was no longer his only reality. There was hope. There was a path forward. And most importantly, for the first time in so long, there was a future waiting for him and his child. The moment the philanthropist's generosity took root, it felt as if a weight had been lifted off the father's shoulders. Within days, everything began to change. It wasn't just a new house or a steady job. It was the feeling of security that had eluded him for so long. The apartment he and his child moved into was modest, far from luxurious, but it was everything he had dreamed of in his darkest moments. The soft hum of a refrigerator, the warm glow of a light that didn't flicker with every electrical surge, and the sense of permanence that now filled every corner of their new home. The first night they spent in their new place, the father could hardly believe it. He watched, quiet and still, as his child fell into a deep sleep, not on the back seat of a cramped car, but on a real mattress. The soft rustling of sheets and the peaceful expression on his child's face filled the father's heart with a joy he hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. For the first time in months, he didn't have to worry about finding a safe place to park or constantly moving on before they were noticed. It felt like the world had opened up to them, offering possibilities he never dared imagine. The following morning, he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. No longer was he waking up with the heavy burden of uncertainty pressing on his chest. He had a place to call home, a place where he could plan his future instead of just surviving each day. The job the philanthropist had arranged for him wasn't glamorous, working at a local warehouse, but it was stable. It was a job that came with benefits, a reliable paycheck, and most importantly, a chance to build something sustainable for himself and his child. As he pulled on the work uniform for the first time, he felt a small spark of pride. It wasn't about the uniform. It was about the opportunity to show up, day after day, and prove to himself that he could still provide a future for his child. But even more than that, it was the peace of mind that changed everything. The nagging worry, the constant fear that he couldn't keep his child safe, was now so. He started thinking about long-term goals, small dreams he had set aside when life felt like it was pulling him under. Maybe he could save up for a car that didn't break down every month. Perhaps one day he could even send his child to college, something that had once seemed completely out of reach. With every small victory, he felt a glimmer of hope flicker within him. Hope for the future. Meanwhile, across town, the philanthropist watched the transformation with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The job well done wasn't something they sought recognition for, but they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment in seeing how one act of kindness had changed the course of two lives. For the philanthropist, it wasn't just about giving away money or resources. It was about restoring dignity and hope to someone who had lost it. The success wasn't just in the tangible gifts that had been offered, but in the way the father's spirit had been reignited. The philanthropist had given him the most precious gift, a chance. As the days went by, the father began to regain a sense of balance. He was no longer living in survival mode. He could focus on his health, on his child's well-being, and on building a better life. His child, now in a stable school environment, was thriving as well. The difference was noticeable in their smile, their energy, and the way they looked at the world. It was as if the weight of uncertainty had been replaced by the lightness of possibility. For the philanthropist, it was a reminder that sometimes, the simplest acts of kindness could spark profound change. They weren't looking for praise. Their reward came in the form of knowing that their actions had made a tangible difference in someone's life. The story of this young father and his child wasn't just a tale of charity. It was a testament to the power of one person reaching out to another in their time of need. The philanthropist's mission had always been about quietly transforming lives, not for recognition, but for the ripple effect that kindness could create. And in this case, it was the father's renewed hope that would echo through the years, shaping his future and the future of his child. As the father drove to work each morning, no longer in his old, worn-out car, but in a new, reliable vehicle he had managed to save for, he reflected on just how far he had come. It felt like a dream at times, but he knew now that dreams could come true, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. Every step forward was a victory, no matter how small. He had the strength to keep going, and for the first time in a long while, he believed that a brighter future was within reach. In the quiet moments before sleep, he would look at his child and feel a deep, unwavering sense of gratitude. This new chapter wasn't just about material comforts. It was about rebuilding a life based on hope, hard work, and the simple joys that had once seemed so far out of reach. And every day, as his child laughed or asked a new question, the father felt more certain than ever that the future would be a story they could write together. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest moments, there is light. Sometimes, that light comes from the kindness of a stranger, someone who sees us when we feel invisible, someone who steps in when we think there's no way out. But sometimes, that light comes from within ourselves. It's the quiet strength that tells us to keep going, even when everything else seems uncertain. It's the determination to rise up, day after day, no matter how heavy the world feels. The story of this young father, living in his car with his child, facing the impossible and somehow finding a way forward, is a testament to the power of human resilience. But it's also a story about the kindness that exists in the world, quietly making an impact without fanfare, without seeking recognition. It's a reminder that we can all be that light for someone else, whether through a word of encouragement, a small act of kindness, or simply offering our understanding when someone needs it most. The philanthropist's role in this story was life-changing, but so too was the father's determination and love for his child. He never gave up. He kept fighting for a better future. And because of that, his life, and his child's life, was transformed. If you're inspired by this story, consider being someone's light today. You don't need to be a philanthropist. You don't need to have endless resources. Sometimes, a kind word, a small gesture, or simply understanding someone's struggle can make all the difference. We all have the ability to be a beacon of hope for someone in need. It's often the little things that create the biggest change. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please like, share, and comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and uplift. Together, we can continue to spread kindness and hope.